Well, hello and welcome to The Mariner with me, Chris Stanmore Major. Now, one of the comments in my video on preventers, somebody said, could you have a look at this incident with a boat called Roaring Meg of Cowes? You see her here on the report. I can't find the comment to come back and kind of give you credit for it, but if you ever watch this, stick a comment down below and mention it was you, and I'll pin it so people know where it came from. But I would be interested to know why exactly you're so interested in this getting looked at, because it's a very small incident. Only very few people will know about it. So I think there's a lot to be learned for it. So thank you very much for bringing it to my attention. Let's see what we can do. In fact, if you look here, see that there? See that little mark down there? What's that? It becomes quite important later on in this discussion. Okay, so what we're looking at is a Marine Accident Investigation Bureau report. This is in the UK if you're amateur or professional and there's a serious incident on the water with injuries or loss of life, then the Marine Accident Investigation Bureau, as a separate branch of government, can do a report on what happened without there being a requirement to find fault. It's just about how did this happen and what can we learn from it, because that is got to be the very heart of learning, hasn't it? And moving not just what happens on the water, but all aspects of human endeavor, moving it forward by understanding the mistakes you made and then trying not to make them in the future. So a report on the investigation of 2 serious injuries on board the IMX-38 yacht Roaring Meg of Cowes in Southampton water, 3.3 cables southwest of Hamble Point Buoy on the 20th of May 2006. And if you know that part of the world, then you'll very quickly know roughly where we're talking about. This is Southampton water. I'll insert a picture here of kind of where this is in the world so you get orientated, but this is a very well-known piece of water to me. Down this route and out of the Hamble is a classic part of yacht racing. It is the turn that takes you down into the Solent. This boat is kind of like absolutely what you'd expect for this part of the world. It's a race boat. We can see a couple images here of what it's like on deck. It's pretty basic. It's all about going fast. It's pretty bare bones. We'll find out what all this is about, but you can see it's a kind of race boat. So this race boat then, unfortunately, is the center point of this accident. So what's going to happen is I'm going to read this. We'll miss out bits that are boring. I will expand on things. And the idea is that by the end of this, with my experience, which is 250,000 miles as captain of sailing vessels, maybe there's something in this I can bring out. I can certainly give my opinion and maybe augment or certainly underline the findings of the MAIB. I'll tell you right now, it's probably very unlikely that I'm going to disagree with whatever they have to say. Let's ever see what I can get from it. At approximately 14:29 on the 20th of May 2006, the IMX-38 yacht Roaring Meg of Cowes, owned by Sail UK Limited of Poole, this is all publicly available information, was crossing Southampton water towards the River Hamble. The wind force was 6-7, gusting 8 from the west-southwest. So let's have a look at the chart down here again, and we kind of just get our bearings straight. So the wind was coming up from the west-southwest, cutting across low-lying land, and then out across a short stretch of water, and then back again onto the land at Hamble. So this is a wide section of water from a yacht's point of view. From a ship's point of view, it's quite a narrow stretch of water, as we can see from the chart here, just looking at how deep this waterway is. There are terminals off to the side here where the ships come in, and then Southampton's up there in the top northwestern corner of the chart. The boat itself is in quite sheltered water. The wave situation is not really that important. The state of the tide might be very important in the Solent. We're going to see what the nature of the event was here, but in terms of the lay of land, we've got a lot of tidal movement here. We've got an outflowing river. We've got wind that's gusting 34 to 40 knots. That's like 80 kilometers an hour coming across low-lying land here with very little breaking it up from what is basically the western approach in the Atlantic out there. So we're out on a kind of racy boat. It's kind of bare bones. It's suited to the waters. The water is not too bouncy, but there's a lot of wind. The yacht made 2 accidental jibes. The first resulted in one of the yacht crew sustaining multiple fractures to one of his legs. He must have gone in the main sheet. And the second caused a second member of the crew to suffer a severe head injury. Okay, so this is serious stuff. 9 people from a social adventure activities group booked what was advertised as a sailing taster. Yeah, we used to do lots of these with Clipper. I think we called them red letter days or something. It was like an experience that was sold. Do you remember that you could go and like WH Smith's or the news agents in the UK and buy like a pack that you could give as a gift? And it was the gift of like going rally driving or horse riding or pottery or sailing or whatever it was. And people were on board for like 4 hours maximum. So totally understand that. During the previous afternoon, Roaring Meg of Cowes was put into the water following 8 months on hard standing. So that's why I immediately drew your attention to this little mark, which is her stand mark here. And we can see a little bit further up that when they're taking pictures for the investigation, there she is back up on the cradle, right? So this boat is dry raced. In fact, hang on, isn't this the boatyard at Hamble Yacht Services? Don't I recognize this? I seem to remember those gardens. I know this part of the world. All right, the skipper, who had been nominated by Sail UK Limited to supervise the group, arrived during the afternoon to prepare the yacht. So nominated, I imagine, like from a pool of other sailors. I hope he's being paid for this. Feeling unwell, he contacted the director of Sail UK Limited during the afternoon and again at 0800 on the 20th of May. By this time, it had become evident that the nominated skipper was not well enough to supervise the group that day, so the director immediately drove from Poole to Hamble to assume the role of replacement skipper. Okay, so let's find out a little bit about who these people are, because these reports are very in-depth and every element is... So if we're going to read the synopsis and get most of our information from there, let's try and understand who we have on board. The original skipper, who subsequently became unwell, was 59 years old. He first went to sea at the age of 18 and has spent most of his life working in marine-related activities. He held a commercially endorsed Yachtmaster Offshore certificate, valid until the 6th of April 2009. He averaged between 3,000 to 4,000 yachting miles per year and crewed Braveheart during the spring of 2006. Braveheart? What is Braveheart yacht? So he's unwell. He's not coming onto the boat today, or doesn't want to. The replacement skipper. The 50-year-old replacement skipper, who was also the director and principal of Sail UK Limited, was previously the owner of a building business before he entered yachting as a profession 4 years ago. He held a commercially endorsed Yachtmaster Ocean certificate, valid until the 11th of July 2007. He also gained his Yachtmaster instructor qualification. It's interesting that he, 4 years before, came into the industry. Wasn't it around 2000 that the UKSA are they not in Cowes? They're in Cowes, aren't they? They offered that course, which was called the Yachtmaster. I can't remember what it was really called because we called it the Zero to Hero course. You get a certain number of miles, you get a load of qualifications, you get a huge amount of input, which is a great way to start any career in anything. Like everything I talk about is get as much information as possible. But 4 years ago, he was in the building trade, and then he got commercially endorsed Yachtmaster, which was valid through to 2007, and he gained his Yachtmaster instructor in 2005, which is the year before this happened. So it seems like he's gone through a very accelerated process, which is not to say that's unsafe. It just is a factor here, because what's going to happen to crash jibes, we know that most crash jibes are avoided by experience rather than specifically getting taught something on one day. You have to kind of feel it. You know, if you can't listen to the instructions in the end, you're going to have to feel that of like, oh my God, the boom's going to hit somebody in the cockpit. Then hopefully, God, it misses them. Then you really know that learning, right? He often took students for RYA day skipper course assessments, predominantly in the Poole area in the UK. He had also skippered between 6 and 8 corporate events, as well as skippering 2 Fastnet race entries and associated qualifying races. He had completed 3 transatlantic crossings, 1 as crew and 2 as a skipper, as well as 1 circumnavigation of the UK, so it's quite a lot. In all, he had amassed well over 21,000 nautical miles sailing, not enough over to be 22,000, but he had 21,000 miles sailing experience. Okay, that's, you know, that's quite a bit. If we were in a different industry where Is that a lot in a different industry? 21,000 miles? It's not very, because the other guy here who's 50 and has been on the water since he was 18 is doing about 3,000 or 4,000 a year. Isn't that what they said? 3,000 or 4,000 a year. So it would take you about 5 years to get that amount. So he has about a normal amount of sailing for someone who's in this industry, who's been in the industry for 5 years. So where are they on that Dunning-Kruger curve, right? We always ask ourselves that. So now we know we should have somebody in the first skipper who is over the first lump and is somewhere on the second rise towards complacency, Mount Complacency. But the first chap could, in sailing, be on his way up to the first hill, which I did not name, but is called Mount Stupid. We just have to think that, right? If I was looking at these two CVs coming onto my desk to hire someone as the mate or the captain of a boat, that's exactly what I'd be thinking from this. Okay, so we continue then. The group began to arrive at 0845. They were surprised that there was no one to meet them, but they eventually found Roaring Meg of Cowes berthed outboard of 3 other yachts. By about 9:20, the replacement skipper arrived with the last of only 8 members of the group to board the yacht. The replacement skipper decided that the unwell skipper could stay on board in his bunk during the trip. He also discovered that one of the group held an RYA day skipper's qualification and had regularly sailed. Okay, so that's a little bit weird, isn't it? If someone's ill, they're ill. I suppose you maybe use them if you have to, but like I know, I can't second guess that. I might do that. As the person who's running the company as well, what he's saying to his person is just stay on board and I'll pay you for the day. And maybe I'll give you a lift home. So maybe that's not that suspicious. But okay, at least you've kept the knowledge on board, right? Even if the body that propels that knowledge is not very useful right now. Because of the weather forecast and the inexperience of the group, the replacement skipper decided that the group would be restricted to sailing in Southampton water, which sounds very wise. If you're down in the Solent at that time and you've got wind from the south-southwest, it's going to have a bit of fetch right down from Hurst, and it's going to get pretty choppy. But up in Southampton water, there's like 0 fetch there, so it's just really the wind that you have to contend with. And 30 knots, I think we need to remember, is quite a lot. By the time you're up into the UK, you're like 52, 53 degrees north. That's quite far north. Warm waters that are off the UK from the Gulf Stream give it this unusual kind of warm-ish. I lived there for like most of my years growing up, down in the, what do they call it? The English Riviera, like Paignton, Torquay, down there. I lived there. And it's kind of warm, but it also has a weight of wind to it, a coldness, which is literally the force of the wind, because it's a very cold part of the world. There's a lot of moisture in the wind and it's quite cold. And that means that for each cubic meter of wind that's hitting you, it has greater mass. So 30 knots there is not the same as 30 knots off California or even 30 knots in the Caribbean. It hits hard. So not much waves, a good idea to not go out of Southampton water, but quite a lot of wind, gusting 40 knots. A very limited safety brief was then given to the 8 members of the group. They were reminded to keep their lifelines clipped on and to keep well clear of the boom. The roll call was taken and there was no explanation given why the 9th member of the group had failed to turn up. You know, that often happens with these, that people are getting these opportunities and their logistics get in the way of it. If you're trying to herd people onto a boat and then get that boat off the dock and go sailing, let me tell you, there's 1,000,001 reasons why someone might not have turned up. The yacht was ill prepared. That's not great. I gotta break it to you. Like if the MAIB report has the first line where they described your boat and it says was ill prepared, things probably aren't going to go very well. I read this stuff as well as someone who is both, you know, I can stand outside of it and look at it like it's a professional scenario, and I just need to assess it completely. What did people say? What did they do? How did this happen? On the other side of it, I've been a charter yacht captain, and I've been in situations where I've cut corners because otherwise a huge problem is going to be created where a small one exists. And then all that has to happen is, of course, your idea of what's an okay thing to let go is not okay, and that's where an accident starts to happen. Ill prepared is a word that I would be mortified to go into a report like this, and that's what they said at the beginning of it. The yacht was ill-prepared. The domestic arrangements were poor. Not that people cared, because it's a sailing taster. As long as there's like a toilet and somewhere to put your bag, it's really not an issue. I've done loads of these kind of things and people don't care. Ropes were tangled. Well, it just came off the hard yesterday. Like, of course it was. But I did see further down, they did have like 6 boats. They had quite a lot of boats that, oh, there's that boat Braveheart. So it's another one of their boats is called Braveheart. Okay, so the vessels that they had were 2 Sadler 34s, Seahawk and Seaturn, and a single Bruce Roberts Goodson designed, Sadler 434. So, okay, so lots of Sadlers. Bold Explorer. They were used for the company's RYA training courses. The handball charter vessels comprised of 2 IMX 38s, Braveheart and Roaring Meg of Cowes, and Communicator, which was a Trip 36 class yacht. So in that 30 to 40 foot kind of region, we can guess what kind of boats they are, even if you don't know exactly what an IMX is. It's clearly a racy boat. It's dry sailed in the Solent. Like, we get an idea of like how this is kept. It is very hard to not just engage all of my preconceptions as to kind of how the boat was. And you know what, even if we actually stop and look at a couple of these images here as they're going past, you can see from the dirty marks on the deck here where ropes have been left. This is the marks of the boat's just been sitting up on the hard for ages. So where's the maintenance at? It's it's wherever it's at. No one knows the answer to that, because clearly people aren't looking after it. So wherever the maintenance is at is wherever the entropy of the universe has left it at the moment where you got it down out of the dry rack. The yacht was generally dirty, both on deck and between decks, and it appeared to have suffered neglect. You can tell that this is a master mariner or similar writing this. And between decks, we mean between the hull and the deck. There's not much else, right? But between decks and on deck and everything is dirty, and it appeared to have suffered neglect. Isn't that an interesting way of putting that? The boat appeared to have suffered neglect. It has suffered you to neglect it. That's a good way of looking at it. The group were very disappointed with the organization, and at that point some of them considered leaving the vessel. I have to say, having done this kind of stuff, it's not really that at all. At the exact moment when they got on board the boat, they were like, oh wow, this is great, because they knew nothing about sailing. One of the reasons that I'm always so hot on cleaning the boats that I'm on is that people might not know much about the sailing and what's going on, the sailing gear that you've got in use, but they know what dirty looks like, right? And that will definitely turn them off. But in the first couple of minutes, they're not really thinking about that. The dirty thing, people are excited about the event and they'll let a lot of that stuff go. It's the thing that charter captains end up becoming complacent about, and in the end leads to that their boats are described as ill-prepared. If this person's come out the building industry and has started a company and has got 6 boats that quickly, I know exactly what's going on. That is a massive clamber to try and get that going. And the fact that this captain has also driven Braveheart tells me there's no dedicated captains in this, and it's just being pulled down out of the rack like the day before doing this event, which people have clearly booked a long time before. I get the feeling it's kind of madcap, it's kind of hectic. I've worked those places, I've run those places. These people at this point, had this gone fine, I can give you, they would have been like, oh, it was amazing, it was a great day, but it didn't go that way at all. And that's when this stuff starts to come and call. After taking on fresh water and fuel, Roaring Meg, it was not prepared. Even though the crew of just getting on board for a day sail, they're still taking on fresh water. Okay, fine. And fuel? Like, that should have been done. What happens if the fuel that came on was dirty? Like, instantly problematic. Roaring Meg of Cowes finally motored away from her berth at 11:30. I can imagine exactly where you are. The group, now much happier, enjoyed the voyage up Southampton water, awesome, and they settled into the business of sailing and completed a number of tacks. The lady who was to suffer the head injury operated the traveller gear competently and was acutely aware of the need to keep low under the boom. Awesome. So far it's going great. This is a good day on the water. Yeah, the boat's a bit dirty, okay, but you know, that's kind of race boats, which is, you know, therein lies the problem of using race boats for this kind of stuff. But so far, so good. We've also got somebody on the main sheet, in the main sheet area, who's aware of how to do things. I wonder if she was the one that had RYA qualifications, as she's sort of taken on that key role on a day where it's super blustery outside. Whoever's on the Traveller on a 30-foot boat has got a lot resting on them. After a light lunch, the yacht turned and headed back down Southampton water. So I got to say, from the skipper's point of view, sticking your nose out there at Hamble with the way the tide floods and the bank that is on on your left as you hook round, and then you're going to go north up Southampton water. You've got to, you know, getting out of there and getting onto the beat, and then beating the boat up Southampton water, which is definitely coming towards you, and ships and everything else, and getting to the top, and then probably heaving to, or whatever they did, go onto a lunch hook up there. From their point of view, the mountain has been summited. You know, now it's just super easy, turn around and blow your way back down to Hamble Marina, bish bash bosh, home in time for tea and medals. You have to be recognizing that as a skipper when it's easy to fall into those kind of patterns, because that's when complacency, the next peak on the Dunning-Kruger curve, complacency comes a calling, right? The qualified day skipper of the group was now on the helm with his harness, so it wasn't the same lady. So we've got a qualified, or we've got someone who knows how to run a traveller, and we've got somebody else in the cadre here who's a day skipper. Okay, that person's now on the helm with the harness clipped to the backstay. The harness clipped to the backstay. Didn't I see an image here of something like that? I went through this a little bit. That is pretty wild. So that safety strap is clipped onto the backstay. Okay, so let's continue. The weather began to worsen. The wind had picked up and there were white horses on the wave tops. By that time, some of the group were becoming unsettled. Again, this is where you are getting information from people after the event, and everything that happened thereafter is going to, of course, color their feelings about what happened on the boat. If nothing had happened at all, they would have gone home and said, "Whoa, it was quite windy today," but you know, they did okay with it. So were they unsettled at the time? If I was the skipper of the boat on one of those what we called red letter days, one of these sailing taster days, and my crew are getting unsettled on one of those, like that's a big red alarm bell for me. I would just take the sails down, because you're going to blow back down south. These distances are very short. The river is forever flowing down. Even if the tide is coming in, it's not that strong up Southampton water, and you can get to the Hamble under motor downwind, like, or across the wind, should I say, quite easily now. So they're in a situation now where they are cutting back to Hamble, and really, if they have to motor or just a little jib or something, that's no problem at all. It's just a sailing taster day. I think that's where people maybe get misdirected as skippers, or you have like decided we are going to do this thing, and therefore that becomes, how can we make this happen? What purgatory, what pain can we go through to allow this thing we have decided to happen? I remember my mum telling me that when I was little and my brother and sister were about, my dad took them for a day's fishing on the boat, and they got down to the boat. It was alongside, put it in with a trailer and everything, little motor cruiser, and the engines wouldn't start. One of the outboard engines wouldn't start, and he, being a mechanic, then set to, and for like 3 or 4 hours completely rebuilt this engine. Probably did an amazing thing. Like, knowing my dad, he probably had the heads off and was, you know, flattening them off on the curb or something, or whatever it was, but he'll have done something and got it started. But by 3 hours in, everyone's so disillusioned and so sad to be down there and be engaged in watching him fixing things, and him probably quite gruff about it, that the whole day was ruined. And so the victory of getting the outboard fixed was somewhat tarnished by the fact that everybody was unhappy. That has always been for me a personal reminder that you've got to keep your head in the game, what you're doing, but also keep a big picture view of what's going on. In this situation, coming back down from Southampton after successfully beating up wind, there was no necessity at all to even sail the boat back to Hamble. If it really is picking up like that, you know what? The other thing, you don't even have to go back to Hamble. Just go alongside in Southampton there. There's a dock right there next to the Red Jet ferry. It must have virtually come past it. We'll look at the chart. This is the chart of movements that they had. So you see they came out of the Hamble, they beat their way upwind here, and they got right to the top up here. Now just here, in here, is a marina. You can just tie up alongside there. It's like so simple. So the big picture game would have saved all of this. What we need to look at is this area down here where things have gone badly wrong, it seems. Okay, so after a light lunch, yes, by that time, some of the group were becoming unsettled. The replacement skipper, who is also, it's his company, right? He's probably the owner of the boat as well. The replacement skipper then appeared to make a quick decision to return to the marina. Some heard the decision, others did not. The skipper began to tack back up Southampton water as he asked the day skipper to start the engine. The day skipper unclipped his harness and checked that the engine control lever was in neutral. So this person knew what they were about. I wonder why I didn't ask the person that's down on their bunk whose boat it was. He found it to be seized, the control lever. Well, sticky is what we'd say. But having released it, he went in front of the wheel to go down below to start the engine because his safety line became taut. His line not having been released as first thought. This is a very normal situation. The skipper, now distracted, turned round to release the safety line, and a few seconds later, the yacht conducted an accidental jibe. Oh, shit. The boom moved rapidly from starboard to port, trapping the day skipper's right leg with the main sheet, causing multiple fractures to his leg. The boom immediately returned to the starboard side. Okay, oh man, that happened so fast. What a shock, holy moly. The day skipper clambered to the forward part of the cockpit, probably not really realizing just how bad this was. At the same time, another of the group, with the help of the unwell skipper, managed to start the engine. At about 14:32, the replacement skipper mentioned the need to lower the mainsail, but he did not direct his instruction to anyone in particular. The lady operating the... Hang on. So there are two injuries on this accident, right? In this accident, right? One person breaks their leg. That's just happened. So one of your crew has just gone so badly into the main sheet, they have multiple fractures in their leg. And then a little later, we mention that we might need to put the mainsail down. Who is in charge on this boat? The lady operating the Traveller stood up, possibly to help with the sail or as a result of the boat's sudden heel to port. Why did the boat suddenly heel to port? And at the same time, the yacht conducted another accidental jibe. The boom moved rapidly from starboard to port, hitting the lady on the right side of her head, causing her severe injuries. Oh man! It was further 5 minutes before the sail was fully lowered and the yacht brought under control. At 14:37, a VHF pan call was made. That is terrible. Oh, that's just the Solent at work right there. The grave or imminent danger to vessel or crew. One of your crew has just been whacked on the side of their head. Like pan for the broken leg, maybe, although you could have a terrible fracture with compartment syndrome coming on and artery damage and Christ knows what if it's compound, right? So, but okay, all right, so it's a pan, sure. But then someone's had a head injury. That is a mayday. That is a mayday. A pan is because you operate in the Solent and you don't want to send out a mayday in the Solent. That's what that is, 100%. There's no way you could possibly have just gone through a 0 to hero course and not know that you need to send a mayday at that point. The Coast Guard arranged for the emergency services to attend the yacht on berthing at nearby Warsash, from where the casualties were transferred to hospital. Both accidents were caused by the replacement skipper's failure to properly anticipate the likely effects of the prevailing wind conditions relative to the course the yacht was being steered. Events leading to the first accident were compounded by the day skipper's lifeline becoming snagged around the wheel, as well as the distraction caused by the need to unclip the lifeline. Concern felt by the replacement skipper following the first accident undoubtedly contributed to the second event. Absolutely. Okay, well, let's try and bring all of this together now in a conclusion. Certainly, if you want to hear what the MAIB had to say, just read the document. It's in the description for this video, or follow me over to Patreon, and then I'm going to do another 20 or 30 minutes and look in the real description that comes after this. This is just the synopsis, but look in the real description for more details, help us understand more about this. But here for YouTube, a conclusion. The conclusion is that everything ultimately comes down to the skipper. And if the skipper is also the director of the company and is also doing the maintenance and is also driving the boat, something there is not going to go right. The MAIB specifically point out the fact this boat is not very well maintained, and we know that she's just come down off her dry stand after 8 months ashore. May is the 5th month, which means she hasn't been in the water since September, October the year before, the end of the last season. She's been plucked off the stand, and this is where we go. Later on in the document, I see there's like bowls and cups and dishes and things down below. Like, I'm not sure if they've been doing maintenance and she's been pulled out prematurely, but it leads to a feeling of like a bad taste in the mouth and a feeling that they're not very diligent about this boat. And that lack of diligence transfers over to the skipper's action. They're getting themselves mixed up in all sorts of details. There's no way that anybody should clip onto the backstay. That's kind of where things start to go wrong. Never, ever clip onto the standing rigging of a boat, specifically because if the boat gets knocked down, you will leave the boat and slide out a certain way from the distance from the boat, which, as the boat is still moving whilst it's knocked over on its side, can be quite a long way. And then when the boat stands itself back up, you will fall from whatever height you manage to get to as a lateral distance away from the boat. Do not do it. So there's no way that that day skipper should have been clipped on in that location. Number two, the fact that you've got an ill skipper down below, I now understand what the MAIB were pointing at when they mention a little bit later on here that the manning is not done properly. You can't have 9 people coming on the boat. Well, there's actually 8 by the time they did it. You can't have 8 people and 1 skipper. That's not safe. If you ever have ratios of more than about 6 to 1, something like that, something's not right. It's been my experience that you can do about 6 people and look after them, where they all are, where all the fingers and toes are. And once you get past that, you get into dangerous territory. That person that was down below is not a coherent, comprehensively available member of the crew, and therefore the manning levels are not being reached. So poor manning, poor maintenance, poor boat handling. Obviously, he's like going back up towards Southampton, then he makes a quick turn, doesn't seem to realize the wind angle has changed, or indeed there's a big gust across Calshot. It's very flat there. It'd be easy for something to come in, but it's been my experience in sailing. People will say, oh, there was a big wind gust or the wind speed increased. It's normally an apparent wind effect as they turn the boat or do something, and that's what's led to this first jibe. The first jibe is avoidable by the fact that the guy shouldn't be clipped onto the backstay, and then a lack of awareness of where you turned the boat. Could a preventer have helped? I think that's why this was given to me by the person that sent it to me initially. Could a preventer have helped here? I don't know enough about the exact situation, and I looked further on the document. It doesn't really note it there, how far out the main was. If the main was way, way out, it'd be a very funny angle for it to be at, coming down Southampton waters there when the wind's from the south-southwest and you're heading southeast. A mainsail that's like way out that far is completely depowered. If it was, a preventer would have been very, very good, but with a crew that know hardly anything, I could understand why it wasn't on. I suspect the main was a bit more in, but it was very, very windy, so maybe they were trying to depower. I think just the whole thing is the mainsail probably just shouldn't have been up by now. They should have just blown back down Southampton water. If they didn't want to stop or they didn't think to stop, they should have just come back down under jib, and that would have been it. All you had to do was go down and cut into the handle, put the engine on in the last mile, make sure everything's running right, take the corner, drop the sail, and you're back into the handle. Aren't we all so clever in hindsight? But this bit where he was going further down and then there's an indecision and comes back up, that then is, he's thinking about, where am I going? What am I doing? What's the wind happening? You know, what's the wind doing? He's only 5 years into his career. He can only be 20,000 miles into being the skipper, because that's the entirety of his experience to date, which is very little. It is very little in sailing. So kind of getting a little bit bemused by the situation, getting a little bit kind of discombobulated, made a mistake in boat handling, and the boom came across. I don't think a preventer, if the boat was reaching back down and the boom was only out about 45 degrees, you wouldn't have a preventer on anyway then, and it wouldn't be it wouldn't be able to stop the boom from coming inboard of the boat. If the main was much further out and they were depowering the main, they should have brought the main down. If they had that thing just flapping around out there, that's bad news all day long. The second accident really is the one to focus on here. Something has gone wrong. Something has gone wrong, and the guy's leg's been very seriously injured. At that point, something else needed to happen other than what happened here. Firstly, the command to get the mainsail down was the correct command. It should have happened immediately. And as soon as you hear all that shouting on deck and everything else, I don't care how ill you are, you're inside the boat, you get on deck and you come and help, unless you're literally at death's door. That would have been so easy for someone to just come and release the main sheet. I suspect on a boat like that, it's probably just on the cabin top, right? It's literally ping one clutch, make sure the rope doesn't get too tangled, because they're all tangled on the side decks on this boat, it looks like, and down comes the main, and we'll deal with it afterwards. So I think the next bit is very understandable if you are living in Annapolis or Long Island Sound or indeed the Solent, that you don't want to have government authorities or the Royal National Lifeboat Institute coming and getting involved with your sailing incident. It does seem to be a way that sailors operate, for sure, and I'm myself included in that as well. So you must put out a mayday when you're in such a serious situation where someone's been clocked on the side of the head. You can't imagine for a second that that's just a pan. That's for like, hey, I saw something in the water, or Bobby hurt his shoulder falling down the companionway, or we got a little leak, or we saw a funny thing. Like, that's what pan's about. It's like, hey, I got something interesting to say. You know, we got a little problem here. Look out for me, but it's not too big a problem now. When someone is bleeding from, it says later on that the lady was bleeding from the nose, mouth, and ears, and you're thinking that this is a pan, like that's really bad. That is negligence right there. But would it have made any difference to her rescue and to what happened thereafter? They were very, very close to Warsash and be able to go and get some help from the shore. So I guess that's what was in that person's mind when they made the decision not to send a pan. But I would say always put out the mayday, and then if it gets downgraded by the Coast Guard or downgraded by the whatever your authority is, that's fine. You did the right thing. Stand at the end of the bar and hear people laugh and giggle and, oh, we put out a mayday, didn't need one. Fine. But you'll never get into trouble in court for doing that unless it's somehow malicious. But to put out a pan and then not be, you know, and then for it to be a mayday situation, that's too much. So poor standard of the organization around the boat, inexperienced boat handling, getting into a situation where there's a lot going on and then not really being able to take control of the situation. All of these things inside that bubble, everything you see inside that crystal ball is all inexperience. It's all inexperience. And that's why when you go into a dangerous situation, which is a strong day on a boat out at sea, understand who's driving the boat, understand whose commands you're going to be working under, understand how good they are at what they do, because I seem to hear from so many people who've been out on the water with sailors who they think are brilliant, and then when things go badly wrong, they realize that that person is only just ahead of them in experience and ability to deal with the situation. So there we go. Yeah, let's try and learn from these things. Let's try and take this learning forwards. There's all the content over on Patreon if you're interested in that. We do a lot more seamanship stuff like that. I'm really getting that under control now. And there are still opportunities to sail on the Maxi in Newport Bermuda if you're interested in that. But that's all from me today. I hope wherever you are and whatever you're doing, you are safe and sound. And I look forward to speaking to you in the next one. Cheers.